We said to the Democrats, no drive-through abortion clinics, and we won't build any border wall. We kept the toxic stuff out.
We kept the toxic stuff out. That's GOP Senator John Kavanaugh, a veteran of 17 budgets. He was explaining how Republicans and Democrats divvied up a $2 billion surplus in the bipartisan budget the legislature passed last week and sent to Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. There's more money for roads, schools, and housing, but nothing was done about school vouchers. But the way the budget came together also left questions about Governor Katie Hobbs' leadership of her own Democratic caucus and her role in budget negotiations that left major items on the cutting room floor. Joining us now are two veteran Capitol journalists who together have more than John Kavanaugh's 17 budgets under their belts. Jim Small, editor-in-chief of the Arizona Mirror, and Jeremy Duda of Axios Phoenix. Welcome back to Square Off. Let's start with an easy question. How would you describe this budget? My word is porktastic. Jim?
That's a great word. I would say surprising. On a couple fronts, I think the fact that we're in May and the budget's done, and I think the fact that you had a budget that got all of the Republicans on board, didn't really siphon off a lot of the Republicans on the conservative end, and the Democrats weren't enthusiastically behind, which you would kind of expect with a Democratic governor that they would have supported it, not in a grudging fashion like they did, but in a fashion that was, excited about what was negotiated.
Yeah, and who knew when we talked about divided government, it would be Democrats divided. How would you describe it?
I guess my word would be begrudging.
Begrudging.
I mean, when we first saw this go through committee, the Democrats, they really put their feet down. They drew a line in the sand. They said, absolutely not. They pretty much all voted against it in committee. It looked like they were going to be doing the same thing. And, once it got to the floor, I think the Senate had to rush things through that night just to make sure they had all 16 of their Republican members there in case none of the Democrats got on board. And eventually a lot of them did. But that was a very tenuous process. I think Governor Hobbs was out there twisting some arms. It was not clear that she was actually going to get any of her own folks on board.
And so the conventional wisdom before the session started was, could the Republicans unite around a budget? They were just fine. The Democrats weren't. What happened behind the scenes?
I mean, obviously, porktastic, you mentioned. There was a lot of pork in there, a lot of stuff to, everyone got to take a little bit something home, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, I think, in road projects, highway projects, local projects. I think every member got a pot of money in leadership, at least on the Republican side, and leadership told them, this is for whatever you want. They could pool it together for some major projects. So everyone got to take something home. And I think for the Republicans, there was nothing in there that really gave them too much heartburn, nothing they're going to have to go back and explain to their more conservative constituents. Because I think we probably all assumed going in the way this was going to work is you'd get, probably a slight majority of the Republicans on each side with a minority of the more conservative members really digging in their heels and saying this spends too much, and then kind of the same thing on the Democratic side, maybe even most Democrats, because they would fall in line behind, their new Democratic governor, but that was not the case.
Do Speaker Ben Toma, Republican Speaker Ben Toma, Senate President Warren Peterson deserve some credit here for navigating all that and get this to the finish line with not much muss or fuss?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that we're, again, we're before Memorial Day, right? And this budget's done. I think most people expected that this was going to drag on into June and probably into late June, and with the kind of the threat of a government shutdown, and that those legislators tend to work really well with deadlines, and sometimes those deadlines are a little terrifying, right? Like shutting down the state government. And I think that the way the session started off, and the really hardline stance, I think especially Republicans in the Senate had taken, and the Freedom Caucus, the members had taken toward Governor Hobbs, I think that there was a lot of expectation that this was really going to drag on. So the fact that it got done quickly, I think, is certainly a testament to all three, to the governor's willingness to compromise to get things done, and to the Republican leaders, willing to get to the table after, I think, starting off the session with really, some kind of bare-knuckled politics.
So did Katie Hobbs set herself up for this because of what she said about school vouchers in her executive budget? She said, we're going to try to repeal the universal expansion, and there was nothing about vouchers in this budget?
Well, I think it needs to be crystal clear that was never going to happen, right? Even the Hobbs administration admitted, really from the word go, that we're putting this in the budget. This is what we want. This is our kind of our dream, but this is not, we know that this isn't going to happen. Republican legislators aren't going to go for it. I think what the expectation was from a lot of people was that there was going to be some kind of middle ground, somewhere between do nothing and get rid of it, that there was going to be something, some kind of compromise or that Hobbs would be able to claw some kind of change to the program, and that just simply didn't happen. And certainly that enraged, I think, a lot of Democrats and a lot of public school advocates who really did see her as, maybe the avenue toward trying to make some major changes to the voucher program.
One thing on the school side, I do want to mention, this isn't getting much attention, but the aggregate expenditure limit has been lifted for next year, so you're not going to see a fiscal cliff. So, Jeremy, Hobbs left two major items on the cutting room floor. Let's start with Prop 400. Maricopa County leaders need the legislature to give the go-ahead for a vote to renew the sales tax that helps fund roads and mass transit. Why didn't Hobbs make that part of the budget deal?
That I couldn't say. I mean, this is generally something that you want to try and get done before that, because once the budget's done, people can go home pretty much whenever they want. But I get the feeling that there is still a lot of disagreement about this. I mean, there are two lawmakers working in the House, two Republican lawmakers working on separate plans. Neither of them, they're not coordinating or collaborating with each other. Both insist that Representative David Livingston and Representative David Cook both insist this is the plan that's the better one. This is the one that's better for everyone. This is the one I think should go through.
Does some of what we saw just show inexperience on the Democratic side at figuring out how to get things done?
I think there's a huge difference between having control of some levers of government and kind of being the loyal opposition. And I think that there definitely are going to be some growing pains. I think the Hobbs administration, we've seen them kind of move in fits and spurts, some periods of struggle and of, confusion. I think right now we're seeing Democrats in the legislature struggling with the fact that the governor maybe didn't have their backs in the way that they wanted, or didn't push hard enough for the things that they wanted in a way that would have made them happy. I do think that that's a good read on it, is that you have a party that's been out of power here, really since Napolitano. And
15 years.
And Janet Napolitano was a political force of her own, and was able to get a lot of things done that even Democrats didn't think was possible.
I want to end this part of our discussion with the question of why the governor didn't strike a deal on getting her appointees through the Senate as part of the budget. Again, same reason there?
Yeah, I think maybe, and I think it may have just been one of those things where Republicans weren't willing to budge on that, and not entirely sure what the discussions were over that, but that does definitely seem like a thing that you could have put on the table and could have used as some leverage to try to get the budget through.
All right, well, it seems like Democrats need to kind of get together and talk it out. I don't know.